what's up, you guys? My name is Grace Lauren Taylor, and you are listening to episode 26 of the Trauma Dump podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Here at the Trauma Dump podcast, we seek to answer the question, what is mental health? How do I take care of my own, and how do I support others? This week, we will be discussing the topic of psychedelics and veterans, how veterans on psychedelics can help cure their PTSD. Our guest of the week is the founder and CEO of the Psychedelic Exchange. His name is Josh Halu. Josh is a veteran, and his goal is to help end stigma around psychedelics and provide insight to how psychedelics can help veterans heal their trauma. Make sure you go check out the Psychedelic Exchange on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook after the episode and show them support. The links are in the description. Remember, if you'd like to share on the show, please message us in the podcast Discord along with your unique experiences, and we will match you to the right episode. Just a quick disclaimer before we start, I'm not a licensed health professional. This podcast only seeks to create community and further understanding of these difficult topics that are so often overlooked and extremely misunderstood. If you or a loved one are in need of medical professional help, we have resources in the description. The topics discussed here are for a mature audience, so viewer discretion is always advised. If you hear some crunkling, that's little Mochi. I have tried to do this intro literally 20 different times, and she will not stop wiggling and womping and like rustling and doing whatever she wants. So we're out here. Do this. We are told as children that our brains are not fully developed. I mean, I've told that at least 1,000 times growing up. I'm only 23, and I was always told that your brains don't fully develop until you're about 25. But what happens when you are 25 and you endure a lot of trauma? We're also told that trauma affects your brain pretty significantly and that it can rewire your brain. But how can you unwire your brain from the trauma? Recent research offers promise that psychedelic drugs may reopen the brain to help it recover from trauma. The study, featured in Nature, which will be linked in our description, reflects a renaissance of using and researching psychedelics to treat a range of mental health conditions. Scientists at Johns Hopkins University were investigating the drug's effects on critical periods for social learning, aka times when the brain is more open to new information. And those pathways diminish as we get older. Success in mice suggests that psychedelics can start fresh periods of learning. If the finding bears out in future studies, the therapeutic horizon for psychedelics could expand into other opportunities to retrain the brain, including recovery from a stroke, traumatic brain injury, and even hearing loss and paralysis. The stakes are big, and the future is promising, said the lead researcher Gul Dolan, MD, PhD, an associate professor of neuroscience at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. He says that psychedelics could be the key that unlocks the brain and helps one after one dose, rather than subjecting them to a lifetime of drugs. Today, we will be discussing how psychedelics can help heal trauma. Psychedelics are a broad class of drugs defined by their ability to induce an altered state of consciousness. These drugs have been used for a millennia in both spiritual and medicinal contexts, and a number of recent clinical successes have spurred a renewed interest in developing psychedelic therapies. Well, hi, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Thanks, Grace. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. We're almost to the weekend.
Almost there, getting close to Christmas. Enjoying the cooler weather. You're based in Texas?
Yes, I am in Dallas. It is weird weather here. Sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold, but I guess that's just Texas for us, you know. But
Yeah,
where are you based?
I'm in Las Vegas.
Okay. How's Nevada weather?
It's got a little chilly the past couple days. It's starting to get into like the cold desert season, but it's nice and sunny all the time, so I can't really complain. I
Okay.
I moved here 3 years ago, and fun fact, they tell you this at the DMV. They pronounce it Nevada here, which I had to get used to saying instead of Nevada.
Oh, so Nevada. For all those that are from Nevada, I am
Yeah,
sorry. I have always pronounced it Nevada.
yeah, me too. It was a big sign on the DMV. It's pronounced Nevada, not Nevada, or Nevada, not Nevada. Oh, I've been saying it wrong for about a year or so.
Yeah, I understand. So, welcome to the podcast. So, you are the founder and CEO of Psychedelics. Is that how you pronounce it?
PsychX, short for
Psychedelics.
the Psychedelic Exchange.
Okay. That's awesome. So, what is the psychedelic exchange, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, of course. So I founded the Psychedelic Exchange about 4 months ago, so fairly recently, to expand access to psychedelic medicine support services like psychedelic assisted therapy, community and support, and education. And we help individuals find psychedelic support services, therapists, facilitators, integration specialists, that kind of thing. It's essentially the whole realm of resources so individuals can get access to holistic and novel psychedelic care to help with mental illness and healing and recovery.
That's incredible. I was raised in a very conservative Christian household, and we were always told, like, don't do drugs, don't do drugs. But
Mhm.
I had a very traumatic upbringing, and then I had a very traumatic experience where my dad was hit by a car and he later died from his injuries.
Mhm.
And dealing with that was crazy. And I had a support group, and one of the girls in my support group was taking psychedelics, and I never heard about that before, right? And she was a little bit older than me. She's about 26, and she actually is a veteran. She served in the army, and um, she served in the army. And I can't remember whether or not she was deployed, but she had a very traumatic experience after the army, and it led her to being homeless. And she told me that the psychedelics really helped her rewire her thought process to be less afraid of men and to continue on this journey of self-love and self-discovery. And for the people listening, when we think of psychedelics, most people think of like the 60s, right? Where everyone is peace and love and chilling out. But do you want to bring back another era of the 60s? What is your goal here? Or is your goal more understanding, healing, stuff like that?
Yeah, it's a complex question for sure, and there's a lot of misinformation and stigma and just misunderstanding about the power of psychedelics and the truth, the reality of trauma, of mental illness, and all of the challenges I think that individuals face throughout life that creates uh, just difficulty in life. And the the concept of psychedelics for me, I only really discovered about just almost 4 years ago now, and it was into the pandemic. I was a former I was in the military as a veteran. Was in the Army active duty for about 7 years as an officer, as an aviation officer. So I was a Black Hawk helicopter pilot and an Army Ranger, doing real Army stuff, deploying to Afghanistan, experiencing war, coming back, not really knowing what to do with it. And I had lost a friend in 2016 that really triggered a lot of the unlocking of the trauma that I experienced. I also lost my father to suicide when I was 4 years old, which had a dramatic impact on my family and my upbringing, and really launched launched my family into a very chaotic childhood for me that I mostly remember with a negative, with a difficult lens versus a happy childhood. And when I discovered plant medicine, it was about 2018, I think, and it first started with cannabis as a way to deal with my anxiety and not drink alcohol as much as as a way to deal with my issues and avoid confronting like my mind. I was in the end of a marriage around the same time too. And I read about psychedelics at some point, I think in 2020, and decided to seek them out. And I'm a pretty resourceful person, so I learned how to grow my own mushrooms and essentially, read a lot about it. Was divorced, moved across the country early in the pandemic, and moved to Las Vegas to be closer to family. And my first weekend here, I took my first dose, and it was entirely intended for healing and for self-discovery. And it was one of the most challenging and beautiful experiences I've ever had. Very full psychedelic, mushroom experience, ending with calling my mom and actually kind of connecting with her and getting kind of coming back down and feeling the need to be grounded. And I also learned, back to your question, about my mom's history with psychedelic use during that time, and she was definitely a child of the '60s and really enjoyed LSD and other psychedelics herself. So she was able to kind of help me through the end of my first very extreme trip. But it was beautiful. I came out of that experience for the first time, definitely for the first time, feeling like I was able to love myself and practice self-kindness and self-respect and really internalize the concept of forgiveness. And it was like all of a sudden this weight was lifted off my shoulders, and I was able to reflect and recategorize a lot of the trauma that I've experienced. And I can talk about that specifically, but it was the first time I was able to really tell myself, whoa, like you can let go, you can live, you can love and laugh and enjoy life. And all of the trauma that you've experienced, is not a character flaw, in me, or I'm not, none of it's my fault. It's just the journey that I've gone through in life that left scars, on me and my psyche and the way that I process things. And so I progressed from there to continuing to, use psychedelics in different forms with other veterans that were struggling with PTSD, with my family, with my mother, several times to heal, our past and the loss of my father. And over time, I really, I was kind of terrified about psychedelics, to be honest. I had to get over the stigma of whether are these drugs, are these like, am I doing something bad? I mean, doing something illegal, sure, but unethical, immoral, I don't think so. I think what I discovered is that mental health is so individualized and also so misunderstood. And the current system that exists, which is largely pharmaceutical based, antidepressants, or other medication, or goes untreated, or just traditional talk therapy, it's intended to reduce symptoms, maybe treat symptoms, but not treat the underlying cause of the trauma that is resulting in whatever manifestation your mental illness is showing up in you as. And the idea that bringing psychedelics back so that we can practice free love and all the hippie kind of perspective of the '60s is very far from my what I and my company want to have a hand in changing. There is certainly an aspect of love and kindness and community and a feeling of oneness with yourself and the universe that comes with being on psychedelics, that I think is good for for anybody that seeks them out in a responsible manner. But more than anything, they really are profoundly transformational in allowing you to very rapidly heal from your traumas, um, as best as you possibly can, create a new perspective on life, and then move forward in life with a healthy mindset, or at least an understanding of how to understand yourself better and live unencumbered by your trauma. And it's really a beautiful it's a beautiful thing when understood and used responsibly.
And I like how you said when used responsibly, because, you know, when the, I know we want to end the stigma, right? But my immediate thought process whenever I think of anything psychedelic, my mind goes to Dare, which was a kind of presidential campaign the first lady put in. I think it started with Reagan of don't do drugs. And they talk about LSD and other psychedelics that can cause you to crash your car or party too hard or overdose, stuff like that. And what I personally believe, the only thing I've ever done was cannabis. My partner and I do smoke weed, and I love to call it medicine because for me, that's what it is. You know, every single, whether it's psychedelic, alcohol is a drug for those of you listening. It is a drug, it's classified as a drug. Um, ev Pharmaceuticals are drugs as well. And everything in moderation and the way you go about it can really help you or hinder you. Um, I do know a guy at my church who did um, die when he was on LSD. He jumped off of a roof. He was not being watched. He just decided to trip and he jumped off a roof and he died. Um, But yes, with anything that we use, you should do it responsibly. Even with water, you can die from drinking too much water. You could drown yourself with like an inch of water if you just put your nose and your face in an inch of water. Anything, anything could either help you or harm you. It's just the way that you use it. And I like what you said previously was like mental health is very individualistic. Um, what may be extremely harmful for me may not be very harmful for another person. And it's the same thing with allergies, right? I'm allergic to corn. Lots of people love corn on the cob. They're fine if they eat a corn on the cob. If I do it, I have to go to the hospital. And what I want to caution our listeners is like, please, if you get a drug off of the street, be very, very careful. Be very careful where you get stuff from. And so I really like your company because you are providing the treatment for these people that do need it, right? They desperately do need it. Um, Without it being like, oh, here's some substance that will get you high. And I'm really intrigued by the whole prospect because you did talk about the pharmaceutical companies. There's a huge monopoly on all pharmaceuticals. And I've been on drugs like medication since I was 8 years old because I was diagnosed with severe anxiety disorder at 8 years old. And they had me on Adderall. That's the first medication they ever put me on was 50 milligrams of Adderall. And man, oh man, did that mess me up as a kid.
Oh,
Like, I noticed it made me not hungry as much. I got a lot done, right? I was very ADHD. I was very anxious. It helped me, but it also hindered me to where I developed an eating disorder because I was like, oh, this drug doesn't make me very hungry. So I don't have to eat so that I can be skinny like the other kids. And I just want to caution our listeners, do your research. I have provided a lot of research in the description that you can definitely check out, but before trying anything, consult with yourself. Like what do I need? Because with trauma, it's very individualistic. And also, when you take any drug, you have to be aware of the circumstances at which you take it, right? What situation that you're in. Are you at a party? Might not be a great time to have your healing session when there's like a bunch of people around,
Mm.
right? That could trigger you. It could do more harm than good, I think. But I like how you said you were like your mother did it with you. Tell me more about that. What happens there?
Mm. Yeah, the the concept of drugs versus, of how we consider what a drug is certainly a thorny subject, and you touched on it a little bit. I do believe that, yeah, like you said, all things in moderation, used responsibly, and there's, caffeine, like caffeine's a drug, obviously alcohol's a drug. Anything that, anything has the capacity to be abused or misused, certainly. And just because something is an approved drug, right? Like opioids, it doesn't make them good. And just because something's illegal on a Schedule I substance doesn't make them bad. Certainly
Yeah.
just a result of our societal, pressures and evolution, and for maybe political reasons or whatever. But the back to your question about practicing plant medicine, healing with my mother. That was actually the first time we probably journeyed together half a dozen times, and the first time was last year, when I was really on a journey to heal my relationship with my mother, which had been very fractured from my childhood. And she had severe depression, bipolar, and eventually sent me away to military school, where I went through military school and ended up joining the military afterward. But coming into coming into the discovery of psychedelics, was a journey with my mom of understanding each other. We like planned for it. She came and visited me one day. She knew that she hadn't. She used to enjoy psychedelics, in the 60s and 70s, certainly. And I learned that about her when I first kind of opened up to her about my desire, my interest in psychedelics, and my practice that I had developed. And she, was very curious about it. And we ended up, she came to visit me one day, for a weekend, and we planned it, and we took the medicine together and really went deep in healing and sharing and talking about, the experiences from childhood, and forgiving, and reflecting, and really closing the gap on what her perspective through life is and my perspective through life, and really understanding each other and starting to unpackage the impacts of, multi or intergenerational trauma, and how things are passed down from one generation to the next, and you don't even know that, why you're passing it down, or that you are passing it down. But it manifests in the way that you're parented, and the way that you then go forward into life and interact with the world. And I honestly thought that I would never have a fulfilling relationship with my mother. And I can honestly say she's like my absolute best friend, in the world now. We talk, we probably talk every day. We have a depth of relationship that was never possible before. Like when I talk to my friends about, the things I talk to my mom about, I talk to my mom about everything, because we have learned to communicate, through, in large part because of the impacts of our psychedelic journeys together. We've learned to communicate on the same page, and truly hear each other and eliminate the thought patterns and the automatic responses and the assumptions and the judgment that comes a lot of times with parental child relationships, and instead see each other just as humans who have our own journeys through life and can understand and respect each other. And before that, it was like I would avoid my mom's call, like 3, 4 times, and finally be like, "Oh, I guess I got to call my mom back. But now it's completely different, and it's different in such a positive way that when you heal with a parent, particularly a mother, I think, who literally grew you in her body and brought you into the world, you like without that foundation of of trust in your parents and of feeling like what unconditional love is, I feel like you kind of have a shaky foundation from which to base relationships on throughout the rest of your life. And once I healed that, right, like I could never heal with my biological father. I just had to, heal myself in terms of how I categorized his life and death in my head. But with which I'll speak on very briefly, that I lost him when I was 4, and for all of my life until my 30s, when I finally started using plant medicine, I had such resentment and anger in my heart toward this person that I really had no memory of and never knew, and blamed for a lot of the impact of the outcome of the fallout after his death. But one big thing that psychedelics taught me was to reframe the narrative I had around losing my father, which translated into a lot of other ways. But as simple as words, like changing the narrative of the words I use and the thoughts that I think. So I went from describing my father as having committed suicide to having died by suicide, and just that little shift, and teaching that to my family, that little shift in words and the way that you think about it, changed my feelings and my family's feelings about my father and about suicide as something that's selfish, and you resent the person and you're angry, and they commit a crime in killing themselves. When changing the terms to died by suicide, you're able to really understand the plight of an individual's emotionality and mental challenges in life, and look through the lens of empathy, and sadness, and the wish, the desire that in a moment of weakness, a moment of maybe experiencing the deepest darkness in your life, you don't feel alone, and you just take your life. You could be, there are other ways, but if that does happen, to look at the person with anger, instead of empathy, is really your own personal response, and isn't serving you or anybody else to hang on to that. So that was a way that I really grew from plant medicine, and was able to heal with my mother as a result. And in the following years with my mom, like we've microdosed mushrooms, like just continued to explore, both our mind expansion, the way that we connect. It's allowed us to experience art together. It's been a really beautiful part of my journey, and healing with my mom allowed her to heal with my other siblings and heal with her mother, and have better relationships in her own life, and deal with her own mental trauma and stresses in a much healthier way. So it's not just the individual, it's the ripple effects from the way that you as a healed individual are able to flow through your life and your relationships. And I've certainly certainly experienced that in magnitudes with my mother and our journey together.
I mean, that's beautiful. That truly is beautiful. I do not have a great relationship with my mother. Um, I think you mentioned before that your mother suffered from depression, has bipolar disorder. My mother also has bipolar disorder. but she also has narcissistic personality disorder. And, you know, you touched on attachment styles, how, which we are going to have an episode on the podcast about attachment styles later on, but you touched on it about you can't rebuild that attachment style with your dad, right? Because your dad is gone, he has died. And I like the reframing that you did rather than say, oh, he committed suicide, he died by suicide. That's beautiful work, honestly, to have that compassion and understanding. Um, I will be upfront and honest. I've tried to commit suicide several times, since I was 14 years old. And I always hated as a child that it was called a crime. And my mother's family is Catholic, and it's a cardinal sin to die by suicide or to commit suicide because you are ending the life that God gave you, right? And so when I was a child, I've had pretty severe depression since I was very little. And that was because I was very parentified. I was in charge of my siblings and myself, our well-being, our food. If we ate that day, that was my responsibility. And I didn't want that responsibility as a kid. I really didn't. And as a kid, um, my family was talking about, Jesus and heaven. You'll have your perfect body in heaven. I've suffered from illnesses since I was very little, been in hospitals, in and out of hospitals since I was very little, and still kind of do now to this day. And my thought process was as a kid, well, if you get your perfect body in heaven, why can't I just go there now? And I think it's so beautiful that you did that reframing. And it was probably so healing because children, when we think of ourselves, we are half our mother, half our father. You're told all the time, oh, you look like your dad. Oh, you act like your dad. Oh, you look like your mom. Oh, you act like your mom. And that must have had some deep wounding for you, that abandonment of your father, of not really knowing who this person truly was, not being able to know who this person truly was. And it's almost an abandonment of yourself for a long time, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would. I think that abandonment is a really it's a not feeling accepted by yourself, by your family, or not feeling like you're able to be your full authentic being. The feeling of abandonment is very real. And actually had this conversation with my mother a few months ago. We've started like writing a book together about multi-generational trauma with psychedelics, and she brought up to me as we're reflecting on life and how we want to tell our story that I was the second child of three, so I was a middle child, and my mom told me she knew after having my older sister with my father that she didn't want to be married to him, and like actually she wished she hadn't married him. So when she became pregnant with me, she said she was devastated and
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to have me. And she described it as, it makes sense to me why you've always felt abandoned from the moment that I found out I was pregnant with you. I didn't want you. So you came into the world feeling abandonment. And um, it took me like for all my life, I felt that. And then I felt abandoned by my father. And then I just kind of stormed through life feeling like this was my life only, and I didn't need to rely on anybody else. And it was mostly like anger and resentment that fueled my energy through life. And so coming to the place where like I used to think to myself, like I'd be angry at my parents and have this thought that I didn't ask to be born, like, and so well, but like you cooking for your siblings, like you didn't ask for that, right? Like you came into the world and this is the circumstances that you're faced with without having choice. And my reframe after getting past abandonment and feeling like actually understanding where that came from my mom, and knowing that that was her own version of trauma as it was being embodied in her, I was able to reframe, feeling like, oh, I didn't ask to be born, like I don't want to deal with this, whatever. I've come to just be incredibly grateful for life, and grateful that I have, a human body and a soul and the capacity to enjoy and live and feel whole and feel like, love and self-kindness. It's still challenging. I still have to practice those things. I still have, negative thought patterns, that I have to work through. And, I have to, I've learned, meditation and breath work, and then, different things that help you calm your mind and eventually get better at just eliminating negative thoughts altogether as much as you possibly can. But now I feel like, um, like my journey through life was just that. Like, I've arrived at this moment. I can't change anything in the past, that happened in the past. All I can do is determine what my mindset is going to be in the present moment, and be as excited as I can be about the future, and just appreciate that I have the gift of life, and that I have the ability to actually enjoy life for the first time, I think, in my lifetime. And it took healing the feeling of abandonment, in a big way, which is, oftentimes I'll meet some people who, or some of my close friends will, they'll always like kind of be surprised at the type of relationship I have with my mom and my stepdad now, which is very close and open and loving. And like, oh, I could never do that with like you mentioned, I could never have that, with my mom. We don't have a relationship. And I always kind of try to help guide people into, the ability to heal, because I've met people that also lost parents, later in life, and they had an incredibly complex and challenging relationship with their parents, the same sort of narcissistic kind of parenting, or whatever. And I feel a lot of sorrow for individuals who have to lose their parents without actually, healing the relationship and feeling relief, that the parent, is no longer alive or something like that. Having to take that to the grave and never actually being able to heal that with the parent, or with, the individual, that maybe caused you trauma, certainly that brought you into the world, is there's going to be a hole there that will never be filled.
Yeah, the hole that will never be filled. The mother wound is so deep. And I'm just gonna speak from personal experience. I've tried very hard since I was a baby to get my mom to actually see me and know me and appreciate me for me. And I felt like I was never good enough, that I always had to change. And I recognize now as an adult that it wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It's that she had that deep wounding of thinking that she wasn't good enough. And so she would project it onto her children. She had 3 children. I was the oldest. And so she would project that onto her children, that if we underperformed, it would make her look bad as a mother, or bad as a mother. And I genuinely don't think I'll have a real lasting relationship with my mother, because to have that, I mean, you and your mother wanted to change for the better, to grow together, to reconnect. And for me, my mother just wants to control everything, everyone, all the time, and always get what she wants. And from my own perspective, healing is not about getting what you want, it's about getting what you need. And it takes time. I'm only 23 years old. I cannot say what the future will happen. Maybe she'll go to an actual therapist who doesn't just tell her what she wants to hear, and start that healing journey of that self-reflection of recognizing how her actions have affected her children and her children's partners. and recognize that, she cannot always be in control. But I feel like for trauma survivors, it kind of goes one of two ways and on a spectrum of like you're not in control, and the middle is like radical acceptance. And on one end, there is that just like, okay, hopelessness, just defeated. And then on the other end, you're gonna try to change everything possible, like angry, defiant. And I've reached acceptance of the only person that I can change is myself. I cannot love my mother into healing. I cannot love her into loving me. And that's okay. And for those of you listening, if you have a bad relationship with your parent, you don't need to carry that into having a bad relationship with yourself.
That's well,
And what'd you say?
that's well said.
Because though genetically you are half your mother, half your father, you are not them. You do not have their soul. You do not have their, you are not in charge of their actions. You're not responsible for what they have done. It's like if a man murders another man and then they kill the murderer's son, and say, this is the punishment. No, that's not okay. That's the child didn't do anything. And it it makes me so frustrated, because you were touching on generational trauma a while ago. It makes me frustrated with generational trauma because, yes, in the womb, there is wounding that happens. Have you heard of Gabor Mate?
Absolutely.
Love him. Oh, he's one of my favorite persons in the entire world. He's an amazing, for those of you listening, I'm gonna put like a playlist in the description of Gabor Mate. You just listen to him, healing, instant healing. But he talks about like wounding in the womb, and you can develop these attachment styles from the womb, and they just progress as you get older. I want to bring this back to psychedelics. How, which psychedelics did you take first off with your mother? And how did they help heal that attachment wound of abandonment?
Mm, yeah. So, so to touch on the psychedelics, particularly plant medicine. So there's a lot under the umbrella of psychedelics. The one that really the only one considered a psychedelic that's legal right now is ketamine, which is not a traditional psychedelic. It's a dissociative anesthetic, but it is an incredibly well acting medicine for processing trauma. MDMA is supposed to be legalized by the FDA next year, and potentially psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in quote unquote magic mushrooms, is supposed to be legalized in the next 2 years. With my mother, we have primarily used mushrooms, and we've also used something called DMT, which a lot of people may not know about, but it's, if you've ever heard of like ayahuasca, people go down to do this brew in South America or other countries. It's one of the active, and it's made from natural ingredients, roots and bark of different trees or bushes, and it's turned into a brew. But one of those is one of the plants that goes into it. The active ingredient is DMT. So DMT is also a very potent psychedelic that really helps you see the bigger picture of life, and feel a lot more connected to yourself and to others in the universe. mushrooms were the most impactful, and those were what I used with my mom. I really, based on nothing other than my personal preference, I really appreciate plant medicine. Like mushrooms literally just grow from the ground. They're one of the oldest life forms, and in fact, they're closer in relation to humans than they are to plants, and in the way that they network, in the intelligence that they have, and they really impact your neuroplasticity and your ability to really change the way that you think. And I think that's, back to your comment about Gabor the way that I think psychedelics really, I've heard a kind of an analogy that made a lot of sense to me. But the way that psychedelics really impact your mind is, if you think about if you like a ski, you're at a ski resort and there's ski slopes and there's well-worn paths, down the ski slope, and you stay on those paths as the only paths you know. That's what trauma and your psyche and your mental picture is like. It's the way your mother is, right? It's the way most people are, probably, is you just have these mental patterns and this clear, thought of what's right, what's not right. You go through life really not healing. You have an impactful situation that leaves a scar, leaves a certain track, and it becomes, solidified. And that is now how you think or how you behave, or, your actions as a result of that are subconsciously, unconsciously impacted, specifically because of that, that negative relationship with a parent, that, that situation in trauma, when you're at war, if you're a veteran, or, a sexual assault, or some sort of violent activity, whatever it is. What psychedelics help do is put a fresh snowfall, fresh powder over that mountain, that ski slope, and allows you to look at the experiences that you've had through life that have caused your mental framework, and look at them from a fresh perspective, where you're actually able to choose and decide from a 30,000-foot view, not in the trenches, what to make of the situations that you've gone through in your life and your own journey through life, and why you feel certain ways about things and why you think certain ways about things. And then actually, the important part of psychedelic work is the integration. That's probably the most important part. The medicine just puts you into a mental place. And yes, like you can do healing on your own with plant medicine, but a firm understanding of what integration of the experience into your life really is, and potentially, support in that area, is really what makes the difference. It's how you take the lessons you learn into your life and carry that forward into the changes you make in your behaviors and your thought patterns. And that's really what psychedelics allow you to do, is get into that mindset where you can reframe, re-understand, look at yourself as, as a beautiful human and soul, rather than as who has the opportunity to choose how you feel and think in a moment, and decide to yourself what your worth is, and what you'll accept, and what you want to make out of your life, and get away from feeling like a victim where life is happening to you. Puts you in the steering wheel, and you're able to say, oh, nobody's making me feel anything, or nobody's making me believe anything. I'm the one who is responsible for my emotions, and I'm the one who is, not necessarily my thought. I'm not in my thoughts. My thoughts are kind of automatic. Sometimes I'm the one behind the thoughts. I'm the one who's able to take all the inputs and make, decisions that are in line with the way that I want to live a healthy life, as opposed to just feeling reactive, and just in a pattern of response that's not serving you anymore, or maybe hasn't served you in a while.
So, with your company, why the distinction for veterans rather than just regular people using psychedelics to heal their trauma?
We're not exclusively focused on veterans. The veteran population is a unique population. The founders, myself and my co-founders, are all veterans, so that is that's the we all have trauma from various points in our life for sure, but the commonality between us is that we've all had experience in war. We've had trauma from those experiences. We've had shared trauma through our time in the military, and I think in a large way the changing the sentiment towards psychedelics and plant medicine is stemming from the veteran community and the support for the veteran community. It's one of those very few demographics that there's by bilateral support of both sides of the aisle, from whatever your political affiliation is, supporting therapies and medicines that help vast populations of veterans live healthy lives is undisputed. I was at a conference in Denver in June called the Psychedelic Science Conference. It was the largest psychedelic conference, I think, in history up to that point. And it had over 10,000 people, and the who's who in the psychedelic and plant medicine space. It had Michael Pollan, How to Change Your Mind. It had Rick Perry, the former governor of Texas. You're from Texas, and he was on stage talking about how not the Republican, conservative, not the type of person you would think would be in support of psychedelics, but he talked about working with Medal of Honor winner and seeing firsthand the transformative power of psychedelics on that individual, undisputed, and seeing what the research says, which right now the research is incredibly just resoundingly amazing in terms of the actual impact of properly executed psychedelic medicine and support. With MDMA in particular, the 67%, so 2 out of 3 people treated with one session of MDMA therapy lose their PTSD symptoms altogether. So you think about what the journey is going through the typical mental health journey, where on average it takes somebody 11 years from the symptom onset of a mental illness to actually seeking treatment. So that's just a starting treatment on average. And then typically you'd go through, like in the military, or at least in the VA, they would traditionally require you to fail 3 different SSRIs, which are antidepressants, and do talk therapy and go through panels just to get approval to go get ketamine therapy, which works like most of the time after one event. So instead of having multiple years of suffering and suicidality and all that, you can it's like this medicine that's legal and approved and certainly works for a majority of individuals should be one of the first stops. Not once you've failed putting money in pharmaceutical companies and going to talk therapy and telling your story over and over again and trying to find the right therapist and re-traumatizing yourself. Right? It's not that. So back to veterans, I think there's such a shared commonality of the way that medication or prescribed medicine, FDA-approved medicine is approved. You'll hear the phrase off-label or on-label. Medicine's approved for specific indications. So an antidepressant would be specifically approved for PTSD or for major depressive disorder, or for there's a lot of psychedelic studies right now showing the efficacy of psychedelic medicines for treating addictions and treating brain injury, like a lot, eating disorders, like you talked about earlier, right? Because it's in our traditional medicine practice, we specialize and we treat, like if you were treating an eating disorder, you'd be as you have specialized in eating disorders and how to understand people's relationship to food and to their body image and things like that. When you think about psychedelics, it's more of a it's more of that fresh snowfall perspective that I was mentioning earlier, which you're not treating the specific condition. You are putting somebody in a position mentally to be able to look at their trauma, their traumatization as from a more objective lens, and understanding that just mental illness, it manifests in many different ways. It could manifest, right? Like your mother says something to you about your body, and then at a developmental age, and then you go through life feeling a certain way about your body, and that shows up in eating disorders, or dysmorphia, different sort of ways that shows up in your life. Same thing for addiction, right? Like you would have a specific addiction specialist versus a just knowing that you go into a psychedelic experience, that addiction is a form of trauma that was caused by something. So what psychedelics allow you to do is go back to that something and then reframe it. So for veterans, I think as we look at the veteran population, one, it's got bilateral support for healing. Two, veterans are from all walks of life, all demographics, all backgrounds and ethnicities and religions. So there's a commonality, but also a diversity. And and a lot of people from challenging backgrounds, and immigrant families, and you name it, right, are represented in like I went to West Point, the U.S. Military Academy, and there's a requirement for every single state is represented. There's students from every single state, right? And it has nothing to do with it's free, you don't pay for the school, you just have to get in, but it's got nothing to do with where you came from, who your parents are, or anything like that. It's a very stringent application process, but it makes it so that the whole country is represented, and all demographics and ethnicities are represented. So I think the focus on veterans is really it's what we know. It's where we come from. It's founders of the company, and it's a large population that I think we can make a big difference in. And traditionally, people think of veterans and military as very conservative and anti-drug and opposed, to these types of things. So making the change in framework with that community, I think would really be a big domino in changing the sentiment toward psychedelic therapy and the stigma around mental illness in general, and being open about mental illness and seeking effective holistic solutions that will ultimately make a large impact in how our society views these medicines.
I definitely agree. I definitely agree, because if we honestly, because when I think of veterans, they are very rigorous, strict, kind of set in their ways. If we can open up their minds to so much, the general population kind of would just fall in line, in my own opinion. Because my dad's best friend, who we call Uncle Paul, he was in the Marines, and he had very significant trauma, like very, very significant trauma. And he was such a lovely man, but you could always tell there was like so much sadness behind his eyes from what he's like witnessed. And when my dad died, it just broke him, completely broke him. Like it was just him and my dad, best of friends. Like no two men have ever been closer. They would kiss each other on the cheek, best of friends, you know. And I I really want to share this with him because I know he has a lot of trauma in general, you know, from serving and then also with my dad. But this kind of gives me some hope for him because from what I'm hearing, your experience has been so transformative that you're like on fire for this, that you want to share this with so many people, that I'm thinking, oh, this is going to help someone that I love very much, that I want him to get better. The purpose of the podcast is to identify trauma and how we can help heal ourselves and help heal others. And the mantra of the podcast is trauma is not who you are, it's what you went through. And I want to ask you this question. I ask every guest this question. What do you think of the saying, transmuting pain into purpose?
Hmm. I think it probably is very much aligned with the journey that I'm on right now, which is that it's understanding where my pain has come from. You know, that like I've experienced tremendous pain through life, disguised as, you know, many things. And the 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 journey to purpose and passion for me were the journey to mental health. And when we think about the way that we go through life, we, you know, often think that um, you know, things just happen to us and we're the victims. So when you start to reframe the narrative in your head, um, and learn about yourself and become inspired, you know, and really feel the gift of life and feel the gift of, you know, having the opportunity to get up every day, you know, instead of feeling like you get up and you're miserable from the beginning, you know, the moment your head comes off the pillow, the moment your head hits the pillow, you know, like instead waking up and feeling like every day, you know, I literally believe this for myself, that every day is the best day of my life, because today is the best day of my life and tomorrow will be even better and the day after that will be even better. It's my best days aren't behind me, you know, like it doesn't matter how old I get another day in my human body and, you know, with the ability to love people and be loved and do things that I enjoy, and yes, work and do all the responsibility things, but I get to do this. I don't have to do this. And the reason I get to do this and feel the way that I feel is, for me, a direct result of my psychedelic medicine use and proper integration of that use. And because of that, and because that gives me the ability to get up every day, or has given me the ability to get up every day with enthusiasm and appreciation for life, for me, I can't think of a better way to spend my time and spend my energy than sharing that love, right? It's not like you run through the door and you want to slam it behind you. You want to hold it open and bring as many people that you can through that door, because it's such a better existence on the other side of that door, especially with people that you care about. So for me, I absolutely, you know, transform my pain, my trauma into my purpose. And it's made all the difference, I think, in my life. Quite much like how you're doing your podcast. You know, when you get to spend your time working on, you know, working on the things that inspire you and that bring you passion and joy. You know, especially when it's stemmed from overcoming your adversity. There's really no, you know, no more gratifying way to spend your life energy.
Exactly. And the back of my phone, I have little fortunes from little fortune cookies. And my favorite one says the secret of happiness is not doing what one likes, but liking what one does. And, you know, I love this podcast. I truly, truly, truly do. It is like my passion project. I have started it over a year ago, but got held back with school and other obligations. And I was a nanny to 4 boys, and I was raising those 4 boys. I did everything for that family. And my partner, Joey, was like, when was the last time you did something for yourself or did something that fulfilled you? And I was so traumatized for like 2020 till now. 2020, 2021 were the worst years of my life because COVID. And then 2020 in June, 3 days before my birthday, my dad gets hit by a car in our front yard
Mm.
and suffers, he breaks all his limbs, suffers from a very traumatic brain injury. He's in the hospital. It's COVID. We can't see him. I was a daddy's girl. My dad was the closest relationship I've ever had in my entire life. Could tell my dad anything, like anything at all. He was not a squeamish dad. You know, some dads with their daughters, a little bit squeamish. I don't want to know everything. I could tell my dad everything. And he never judged me. I was never criticized once by my father. And I was devastated by his loss because I kept telling him, the day before the accident, I was like, I'm going to be turning 20, Dad, so you can't call me a baby anymore. It's like, you will always be my baby. And it's so sad. I don't want to cry, but I'm eternally grateful that he's no longer suffering. I'm eternally grateful that he isn't here anymore because I learned so much from him. I have no idea what else I could learn. He was the most diligent, compassionate, understanding father I've ever met. I've never met a better father than my dad. And um he died in November of 2021, but a few months before he died, my grandfather died, my mother's father, who I was also very close to. And then a few days later, my cat, who I brought with me to college, he was my ESA. He lived in the dorms with me. He had a heart attack and he died. And then like less than a year after my dad died, his dad died. So all the men in my life were wiped out like that. And I was devastated, devastated to say the least. And I laugh now because that's not how I look back on it anymore. I don't feel devastated by it anymore because statistically, I read this statistic that the most time you're going to spend with your parents is when you're like from when you're born to when you're 18, and the rest of it will equal to about 5% versus how you lived with your parents. And that honestly healed something in me because with loss, there's that, well, what ifs? What if my dad had more to teach me? What if I could have learned more from my papa? What if my grandpa could have shared something that I didn't know? And yes, but their legacy still continues on in me and my little brothers and the way we conduct ourselves. And it's very healing to look back on that and know that I do know that my dad would have been very proud of me, very proud of this podcast. And going back to Joey saying, when was the last time you did something for yourself? It made me think about my dad, who never spoiled me, but was intent on showing me that I should be provided for and cared for, and that I should care for myself. And I recognized that once he was gone, I had forgotten how to love myself and show myself compassion and understanding. And I started developing pretty bad seizures. And, I was diagnosed with PTSD. I got re-diagnosed a couple months ago, so I still have it. Wish I didn't. I think I'm a lot better, but it was very severe. Joey's like, when was the last time you did something for yourself? I thought back to my dad and how my dad constantly showed me how to take care of myself, and the way that he took care of himself was constantly trying to get better, no more. And it's like, I should start a podcast. So I did. And I started doing a lot of research because when I was going through the depths of despair, all of my friends abandoned me, which they're not truly your friends if they abandon you, but they all did. I blame it on their age. No, I was in early 20s, still in my early 20s. And I thought there has to be other people who are feeling the same as me. So I created a Discord server where people can anonymously share what they're going through. And then that spurned into me giving them advice and listening to what they were going through and doing research and research and research and trying to understand the brain and what happens, what is neuroplasticity, trying to understand everything into creating a podcast where, I'm not a mental health professional, but I am a person who has lived experience. And I just want to connect with other people and allow them to have a platform where they can share their experiences without judgment, without criticism, and we can learn and grow together. And I feel like that's what I'm accomplishing. And eventually, hopefully, the podcast will be in a place where so many more people will become trauma informed. We're a pretty little podcast right now. We're just chilling at like 1,000 subs on YouTube, which I'm eternally grateful for. But I feel like this whole conversation about psychedelics could really help so many people. And I really hope it more psychedelics become legalized. Um, and it sounds like the summit that you went to, do you think they're trying to make a way for laws to be introduced for psychedelics?
Yeah, it's such a challenging uh, challenging effort from a lot of perspectives because there's so many different there's so many different interests and groups that want their interests supported, right? There's indigenous tribes, which a lot of plant medicine goes back to indigenous use and indigenous lands, um, an appropriation of more indigenous medicine, Eastern medicine versus Western medicine. So there's the focus on preservation and recognition. There's pharmaceutical type of companies, biotechnology companies that want to potentially capitalize on money to be made in this space. Patenting, you can't patent a mushroom, but there's other psychedelic molecules and stuff that can be patented. So there's the financial aspect. There's the aspect of legality versus decriminalization and what is going on, state by state. Right now in Colorado and in Oregon, psilocybin mushrooms are and other plant medicines or psychedelics are decriminalized. Whereas federally, there's still Schedule One substances like cannabis. So there's all sorts of different groups that are just trying to be heard and have their viewpoints presented and be part of the conversation. But ultimately, the collective is from policymakers to celebrities to um, to leaders in all fields are seeking to create a world where there's healthy use and access and support of these medicines that can be maintained responsibly and used broadly and safely, for as many individuals as possible, because I think over 20% is just of Americans are have some form of mental illness, and that's 1 in 5 people. Plus, people trauma informed. Some people just don't even recognize, just because they're not diagnosed with something, that you don't even recognize that you have some mental illness or trauma that's presenting itself in you in certain ways. And so there's a lot of perspectives going into the psychedelic space, But the most important, I think, the most important viewpoint is that the outcome that I think the majority are desiring is a world in which healing is a focal point of how we grow and live, and vulnerability is encouraged, and openness and support and an understanding of mental health and mental illness is embraced as an individual, as everybody's individual journey. And so there's a lot of work. I mean, there's research on veterans going on right now, to see if to see the effectiveness and create plans of integrating plant medicine or psychedelics into services that are provided to veterans, and creating protocols around that. So there's a lot of effort from many different groups going into both the formal FDA approval process for drugs, going into laws and policies that are either trying to decriminalize or reschedule these substances, taking all of leading different movements. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal a few months ago that on the front page talked about how many leaders in like Silicon Valley all microdose psychedelics. So there's a huge focus on like the biohacking world, and the mind expansion world, and creating creativity and improving performance, and performance in mindset, performance in physical activity from the effect of psychedelics. So, but it's we still don't know really how the brain works, right? The brain, like there's brain scans that show after taking psilocybin, you have stronger neural connections in your brain that didn't exist before. So but we have such a small understanding of how the human brain actually works in the psyche, and then add in this new paradigm of psychedelic medicine, and and it's kind of a wild west. So there's a lot of like holding the reins back, let's approach this as diligently and responsibly, and methodically and slowly as we possibly can, versus another camp that's like, no, these things work. We don't need any more research telling us that these things work. We just need to figure out how to responsibly and ethically get these into cares, treatment protocols, and into people's lives that need it as quickly as we possibly can. So there's all these different balancing viewpoints, but at the end of the day, it's the world that many of us in the industry believe in and want to create is one in which we can heal from our traumas, we can live full lives, we can build communities the correct way, we can support each other, we can be proud of our journeys as uniquely our own, and be proud of the people that we are, because of what we've gone through, not in spite of.
I like not in spite of, but yes. Because when we say in spite of, it's such a negative connotation. Like in spite of all the trauma that you've given me, I'm going to keep going, rather than, yes, this has happened, the radical acceptance, this has happened, and yet I will continue forward. I really appreciate you sharing with us all of this information. It's really amazing the amount of work that you have put into your company and your own healing. It's really evident in the way that you express yourself. Honestly, it's inspiring. Speaking directly to our listeners, what would be your personal message about healing from trauma?
It's probably the most worthwhile journey and undertaking to go through. When you live from a perspective of unhealed trauma, you're never going to live a whole life. You're never going to live a life without self-judgment, without projecting insecurities onto others, without being able to love unconditionally, right? Because I think your capacity to love is to love others is limited by your capacity to love yourself. And if you can't fully love yourself, you certainly can't fully love others. And I think that, you know, the for me, I fully believe that love is either unconditional or it's not love. It's something else. And unconditional love truly means that it's unconditional. Like you know, the in spite of comment before, there's a gratitude that I say every day, and it's that I'm grateful for every step of my journey, especially the difficult ones, which strengthened my perseverance and character, making me who I am today. And being able to recognize that for myself, you know, and in others, where we can look at, you know, that yes, life happened to us, and we're carrying everything that we've gone through. We can carry it as baggage, or we can carry it as strength, you know, and so the work that you see in me, and I see that you've, you know, certainly put in your own work, and you're doing great work with your podcast and creating conversations, open, vulnerable conversations around trauma that allow people to heal from seeing other people's openness. I think it's really powerful. To me, I consider vulnerability to be my strength. You know, that and when you decide, I think it's in a very intentional decision, when you decide to embark on truly healing and believing that it's possible, you know, I don't think you're ever maybe you're never a fully healed person, but there is a journey that you go on, and it's not linear, right? And you get to a new place where you think you've healed, you know, and you've recovered and you're living well, and there's always another layer to shed. But you have to shed a layer to shed another layer to shed another layer, and over time you begin to live with so much more lightness and levity and joy and, you know, inspiration. And to your point, you can use those lessons to actually live a life like that's of your design and of your passions, right? You're not, you know, if you had some trauma that created your desire to, you know, choose a career that's not interesting to you because you felt like you had to, or something like that, and you get to reframe that and go a new path because you release that trauma and you recognize what it developed in you, and you can appreciate the lessons that you learned along the way, and then you can decide what you want to carry forward. You know, everything, an emotion, a possession, a relationship, has a carrying cost. And I think the work on healing your trauma is really determining what you're choosing, intentionally choosing to carry forward, and what you're choosing to leave behind, and what thoughts and feelings no longer serve you. And so there's, to me, there's no more worthwhile journey than to go on the journey of self-healing and self-love and kindness, because it allows you to live such a fuller, more meaningful existence that then turns into the ripple effects from you living a life of abundance and happiness and sharing that, right? That's contagious, right? That grows. There's no limit on the amount of love, right, that you can experience. It just can keep on growing and filling space. And the more that you love yourself, like I said, the more that you can love others. And I think that's the real currency in life. That's what matters at the end of the day, not what you have in your house, but, you know, what you have in your heart.
That is very beautifully put. That is very beautifully put. Do you have any resources or recommendations that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, there's certainly resources on our website, psychx.com. Like you've talked about, there, you know, this isn't we're not mental health, professionals. So people seeking that there's suicide hotline, there's mental support hotlines that I think people shouldn't hesitate to call if they have any challenges mentally, or are feeling like they don't have a support network. You have your Discord channel. We're creating communities of support on our PsychX platform. So you can find people, like-minded individuals or from similar backgrounds and communities, and be able to share your stories. You can communicate with us on our social media channels. We're still in the early building process, but we want to help everybody that needs it find the right type of care for them. Um, I think that there is so much positive work that can be done when you start to take action toward your mental health as the foundation for how you build a healthy existence. That the resources, I think, are just starting to become more widely available. So yeah, please reach out to us on our platform. We'd love to connect with you. Participate in our communities and your Discord channel. And I think just know that the opportunity to live a whole full life and existence on your own terms is completely possible, and you're not ever a victim of your circumstances. You're incredibly capable. Everybody's incredibly capable of of living life meaningfully and to the fullest, with relationships that serve them, and with love in your heart, and a song in your heart, with delight and joy, and not with pain and misery as kind of your steady state. And yeah, it's a joy to be able to work on a company that's seeking to expand that sentiment. I often say, right, and you can certainly look into plant medicine, right, and go through proper channels and do it, do it responsibly and safely. When you go down that path, educate yourself, but know that you're never without options. You're never just a victim to your circumstances, and they're unchangeable. It's more than anything. It's mindset. It's reframing. It's reshaping the way that you look at the world and the way that you look at yourself, that allows you to live life beautifully and empowered.
Live life beautifully and be empowered. Should put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah,
It's a good saying. It's a good saying. I think, yeah, live life beautifully and be empowered. It's a very good saying. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you for having me, Grace.
It was amazing to meet you. Thank you for your team reaching out to me to be on this podcast. They're goats. They're the goats out there. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you have a blessed day and your next meeting goes very well. This episode will air this will be the first episode to air in January, so January 7th.
Start the year. Yeah.
You're gonna start the year. Psychedelics. Let's go.
2024 is going to be a transformational year for sure. Yeah. I
Yeah.
absolutely appreciate you, Grace. Thanks for having me. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
the opportunity to talk about this. I mean, this is my passion. So, to me, the opportunity to have these conversations, even if even if it's just a one-on-one conversation, I know there's ripple effects once you start to open people's minds to what living a full life, and what healing from trauma and being trauma informed, and really working on understanding yourself and how your mind works. When you go down that path, you just keep learning, and you follow that curiosity, and the further you go, the more amazing life becomes. So yeah, I just am grateful for the opportunity to share and to speak with you, and thank you for doing what you do, and bringing a spotlight to trauma and what's on the other side of trauma.
Thank you.
Right here. Today's memes of the week from our Discord are right here. If you're watching us on YouTube, here are our memes. Just a quick reminder before we part, this podcast seeks to forge a strong community, so please don't hesitate to join our Discord to share with others and for podcast updates. In the Discord, we have so many different channels of discussion that include more than just trauma. We wish to create a place where you can be heard, so please join us. You are needed and appreciated, and we'd love to meet you, know you, and support you. At the end of every week, we spin our wheel of emotions to learn a new feeling and how it correlates to trauma. All right, it landed in between optimistic and intimate. So we're going to stay on optimistic. I'm very optimistic about how psychedelics can help heal trauma. Honestly, I am very interested in trying them for myself. I know one of my best friends does use mushrooms, and she has very severe PTSD, and it has helped her so much. Like, truly, it's night and day how she used to be versus how she is now. And so maybe I should try them. So I'm a little optimistic about, psychedelics and helping heal trauma. And I'm a bit optimistic about my chances for helping heal my trauma. Special thanks goes out to all of our Discord users. You guys are the best, and your encouragement has helped me carry on. If you'd like to support our podcast, we have a Patreon. Different tiers can get you a bracelet, or you can come support us over on Bonfire, where you can get custom apparel designed by yours truly. The links are in our description. Remember, please like and subscribe to our show, and also please share it with your friends. You are capable of a fulfilling life in spite of your circumstances and your trauma. May you rise again from the ashes and be filled with peace, love, hope, joy, and understanding. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Goodbye.